Hello, thank you for joining us to watch our creative work presentation, Stories and Spaces, Updating Classic Plays for Modern Audiences through Research-Based Ideas in Scenic Design. My name is Julianne, and this is Amanda. Last year, we were in a scenic design class together, taught by Jerry Hooker, and today we will be presenting our two unrealized designs created in that class from the classic plays Hedda Gabler and Iphigenia in Aulis.
A crucial ingredient to the long-term success of classic stories is their ability to remain relevant over time. Retelling stories allows us to illuminate and explore lessons from iconic narratives that have been overlooked. Theater is an inherently dynamic art form because it gives breathing room for artists and creators to adapt the classics in new and exciting ways. Scenic design is the creation and production of the physical world of the play, and research is a foundational pillar of excellent scenic design.
So I will be presenting my scenic design for Hedda Gabler, which was written by Henrik Ibsen in 1891. So as with other famous identity plays like Hamlet, the focus of the narrative is on its titular character, Hedda Gabler. The plot is as follows. Hedda's newly married and she's bored already. As old lovers and new friends come into her life, Hedda engages in a power struggle to manipulate all of them, inevitably being overcome, and in her loss, she commits suicide. One of the many themes in the play is control. Hedda feels unbearably powerless in her own life, and that lack of control motivates Hedda to manipulate the people around her to try and gain some sense of power and autonomy over her own life. So my design goal was to play with how space can oppose a person, how it can stand as an opposite and antithesis to the protagonist, because this world needs to represent the trap that Hedda's been placed in. It's not supposed to be comfortable to her. It needs to be foreign and hostile to her nature. And that's what I wanted to focus on in creating my design. And these images you're seeing on the screen were my inspiration images at the start of the project. I was inspired by their colors and their mood, and I liked their theme of femininity, sadness, madness, and distortion. So they really helped me along the way. One of the first steps in the process for me was I wanted to understand Hedda as both a character and as a person. In a lot of ways, I found I was yearning to understand her because if I was going to build her world, it felt like it was only appropriate to know her. So that obviously started with reading the script. I read through the play many times and I took endless notes, but I also wanted to do a sort of independent supplemental research into women who have committed suicide. And through that exploration, I found the unabridged journals of Sylvia Plath, who wrote all of her life before her death, and they ended up being so crucial to my understanding of Hedda. The way Plath describes the relationship she had with others, as well as the relationship she had with herself, was shockingly similar to what I saw in Hedda in Ibsen's play. I was able to better understand the frustration Hedda felt at her limiting life by seeing it through Sylvia Plath's perspective. I also read the writings of Virginia Woolf and Emily Dickinson and pulled similar emotional reactions from them as I did with Plath's diaries. And it was really only after reading the writings of those three women that I felt comfortable creating a space for Hedda. So the next layer of research I did was applying what I learned about Hedda's identity and finding that in the time period I had chosen, which was the 1950s in America. In the play, Hedda is an individualist. She pushes against conformity with society. For example, she does not want children. She barely wanted to get married. She doesn't like monogamy, and she finds herself resenting her life with her husband in their happy little house. And I saw a lot of connection between that and the firm expectation for white women in the 1950s to get married and become housewives. So if we're imagining Hedda Gabler in that time, her frustration would be understandable because she doesn't want to live that life, but feels an enormous pressure to do so. So my form of research for that time period, outside of general research into the cultural and political context of the time, was through watching the instructional videos shown to young girls to teach them how to be the ideal woman of the time. And here's an example of one of the videos that I watched.
So now I add the pectin.
Educational films like this one reflect society's belief that women could find fulfillment only as housewives and mothers.
Now I let it come to a full rolling boil again. It won't take long. You like to cook, don't you, Pet? Oh, it's not just liking to cook. It's more. It's accomplishing something. It's me cooking. Me, Susan Douglas. And not just cooking, but, creating something special.
So if Hedda existed in this time, she would have been shown these educational videos, not to mention she was surrounded on all sides by advertisements, such as some of these shown here, suggesting that her purpose was to be a housewife. Therefore, a sort of tension is established because it's her versus a society that really does not want her the way she is. So she wages war on it and loses, unfortunately. So by ingraining myself in those videos and ads and allowing myself to feel the way she may have felt while watching them, I was able to access the frustration she would feel associated specifically with this time period. So using what I knew about Hedda and the importance of the time period I had chosen, I started to work out my ground plan, which is essentially an overhead blueprint of the stage. Using the script as a guide, I was able to piece together where I wanted important moments to take place. For example, Hedda's first appearance and her suicide occur in the same spot on the stage, in what Ibsen calls an inner room. So that's a really pivotal location I wanted to emphasize, so I placed it at one of the strongest points on a proscenium stage, which is upstage right. Another important decision for a scenic designer to make is which architectural style would be best. I decided on a mid-century modern style because I felt it was the most opposite of Hedda as I could find. She's a complicated woman who comes from money, so I don't think she would appreciate the simplicity of the mid-century modern style. I imagine her growing up in her father's home, which could have been an old Hollywood house from the 30s and 40s that would have had an emphasis on maximalism in style. So the relative minimalism and clean lines of mid-century modern seem to oppose Hedda's life and inner complexity. So I found a Frank Lloyd Wright photograph book in the design library and pulled a lot of visual inspiration from that. So that leads me here. Once I had done my research, I was ready to incorporate my creative decisions and pull this design together. The final steps of the process involved creating a watercolor rendering and a white model. Here's a photo of my color rendering for my final design. Because this home is designed to oppose Hedda's personality, I imagine her attempting to regain control over the space by treating it like her playground. So she'd climb all over the furniture, rearrange items as she wishes, throw things, break things, and so on. Notice the way the walls tower over the people inside, and it almost feels like it's swallowing them, and how it feels like the piece is sort of caving in on itself. Look at the way the ray of blue light above is evocative of a blue sky Hedda never gets to see, and it feels like the freedom she never gets. Also notice how the back window is shaped like the crosshairs of a gun in the room where Hedda commits suicide. And here's a photo of my final white model. I really loved working on this project. This was the first design I did that included extensive research, so I learned a lot from it, and I really enjoyed infusing this research into the soul of my design approach. And now we are going to see Amanda present her scenic design for Iphigenia in Aulis.
The concept for my scenic design was to create an environment at the seacoast that was meant to be temporary but remain long after its expiration date. Iphigenia in Aulis, written in 410 BCE by Euripides, finds new relevance when placed around the time of DDay Normandy in the 1940s. Creating the scenic design from Agamemnon's point of view, I focused on how Agamemnon reached a point of no return within the play, where he was cornered and forced into a decision with no escape, which parallels the impossible situation of the soldiers on D-Day. My scenic design includes a visually out-of-scale boardwalk with gaps that continue into strong lines detailed in Agamemnon's bunker base. Throughout the play, the gaps in the boardwalk present an inherent danger of personal injury from falling off the boardwalk, which mirrors the fear of death felt by the soldiers on D-Day. Additionally, I intend for the soldiers to walk entirely within these gaps, thus introducing a social hierarchy between the main characters and the soldiers. The boardwalk also represents how Agamemnon was forced into a corner with no escape, because once you reach the end of the boardwalk, there's nowhere to go but to fall into the open sea. This is my main inspiration image, and it played with the idea of multiple sharp lines and images distorted with perspective and scale, like the structural man-made grating. Studying this image, I imagined what the play would look like if it occurred on a seaside boardwalk, and how changes in scale could affect the characters' emotions in this environment, creating dynamic tension through risk of pain and death. From the continual mention of water, flooding, tears, eyes, it affected me throughout Iphigenia in Aulis. From those words, I found these inspiration images, which conveyed the ideas of water, tears, and eyes in a way that plays with scale. Both of these inspiration images depict very large or out of scale eyes crying water, which turns into a river. These larger than normal images led me to the idea that such a difference in scale represented how small Agamemnon was in comparison to the size of the problems and grief which plagued him. He was just one man faced with murdering his daughter or seemingly murdering his daughter by way of his men. In turn, I reinforced this out of scale idea with my larger than life boardwalk plank suspended across the floor of the stage. For my setting, I chose DDay Normandy in the 1940s as an example of a military encampment involving the seacoast. These images gave me inspiration in the creation of Agamemnon's bunker. Additionally, I found inspiration images from World War II and scholarly articles describing the implications and events surrounding D-Day. These articles resonated with me, and I realized how Agamemnon's ardent drive to find a solution to a seemingly unsolvable and immense problem of the directions of the wind parallels the soldiers' drive to complete their unpredictable campaign and immeasurable task to storm Normandy. In a book I found which detailed personal accounts from the soldiers who fought during D-Day, the unparalleled intention to find a way through the battle even in impossible situations was very apparent. In this way, the scholarship surrounding D-Day describes a situation and environment which, when applied to Agamemnon's position, reveals the motivation behind his actions. Although in the end he gave in to weakness and chose to sacrifice his daughter, he was motivated by the need to be the leader he knew he had to be and to lead his soldiers into a seemingly insurmountable battle, alike to the soldiers at D-Day Normandy. This is my inspiration model. It expresses the dynamic overlapping lines depicted within my final scenic design. In the early phases of my design, after I had decided I wanted to include a boardwalk, I played around with having the planks be in an overlapped triangle formation, as seen in this initial drawing. I knew I wanted the wood and planks to be an integral element, but I struggled to determine exactly how the plank should be positioned. After considering the complex and confused nature of Agamemnon and his environment, I realized that overlapping the planks in a way that interacts with the audience creates the emotion that I was striving for. In turn, I believed making some of the boards on the boardwalk bigger than others, as you can see in my final ground plan, and laying them on top of each other without a specific pattern would communicate the confused and chaotic nature of Agamemnon's mind. Additionally, I wanted to continue the strong angular lines of the boardwalk up onto the vertical face of the bunker, Agamemnon's base upstage left. So I created wooden beams going vertically up the bunker to emulate Agamemnon's world with forceful lines. The barrier at the top of the bunker represents the chorus space, where they can be present in the scene but exclusively remain onlookers. The planks of wood are stepping stones for the individuals of high status within the play. They are meant to walk above the muck of the sand and remain higher than the level of the soldiers. Iphigenia enters and exits from a plank which is dropped onto the set pieces and is lifted after her final exit, as if to create a temporary pathway from Agamemnon's world to Iphigenia's.
Overall, the restoration of classic plays provides us a valuable basis with which to view the evolving and dynamic society which surrounds us. Thank you for watching, and here is our works cited.